I ranked maximum temperature for the United States against the last 85 years. The results are unbelievable. Time out. This video is about the United States. If you'd like to see the temperature ranking for your country, like the video, comment, and I'll build that map for you. In this analysis, I'll go through four maps in sequence. First, we'll look at the observed 10-day maximum temperature, then the observed 85-year ranking map for that same period, then the 10-day forecast for maximum temperatures, and finally, the 85-year ranking map for that forecast data. The main story is sustained heat from the southwest through the Rockies, plains, and into the parts of the south, with several areas running not just warm, but historically warm for this point in the season. Hey guys, Dr. Fergus Keating here with weathermapping.com, a Marcus Weather Incorporated product. This is a look at maximum temperature for the lower 48 for the 10-day observed window and a 10-day forecast window, along with how those periods rank against the last 85 years for the same time period. So this is not just about where it's hot in absolute terms, but where the warmth is unusually strong relative to modern history. First, let's start with what these two metrics actually mean. The first is maximum temperature in degrees Fahrenheit. This is the daytime high, or the warmest temperature reached throughout the day. And on the maps that we're looking at, this is over a 10-day period. So it's representing the average of the daytime highs across those 10 days. The second metric is a ranking map. This is a little bit more complex, so just bear with me. This map compares 10-day maximum temperature pattern against the same 10-day period for the last 85 years. So a rank of number 1 means it's the hottest in the full record for that time window. A rank near the middle, around the low 40s, means it's roughly average, and a rank near 85 means it's the coldest. A simple way to kind of think about it, a place usually sees highs around the upper 50s or low 60s in late March. They might run into the upper 60s or low 70s this year. This may not sound extreme compared to the summer, but for that exact calendar window, it can still rank very high historically. So the ranking map tells us whether the warmth is just kind of mild spring weather or it's something much more unusual. Why this metric matters? Well, late March, early April are transition season weeks. Unusually warm, high temperatures at this time of year can do crazy things, and we're already seeing it. Acceleration of snowmelt, increased evaporation, huge shifts in energy demand compared to earlier in the season, higher electricity demand, heat stress that for people that aren't fully acclimatized yet. The raw temperature map is telling us where it's warm or cold. The ranking map is telling us how exceptional this warmth truly is. Let's give a regional breakdown here, and we'll look at this first map, which is maximum temperature observation. This is roughly between March 16th and March 24th for 2026, and the country is showing a very clear large-scale gradient from cooler in the north to warmer in the south, with an exceptionally strong warm signal across the west and south central states. In the Pacific Northwest, coastal Washington, Oregon are mostly in the upper 40s to low 50s, while the inland sections step into the 50s and low 60s. Some of this is cool to mild overall, and not especially warm in absolute terms. As you move south into California, temperatures ramp up quickly. Coastal California is broadly in the 60s to 70s, and the Central Valley gets well into the 70s and lower 80s. By the time we're reaching the desert Southwest, Arizona, temperatures have kind of risen dramatically, and we're in the upper 80s, low to mid 90s. The interior West is also noticeably warm. Nevada, Utah, kind of much of the Four Corners region are sitting in that 70s to low 80s. Even farther north into Idaho and Wyoming, and parts of Montana, Colorado. There's a lot of 50s and 60s and kind of low 70s on this map, which is unusual in my opinion. That's more important because it shows that this warm pattern is not just confined to the desert regions. It extends deep into the Rockies and the Intermountain West. Across the plains, the north to south contrast is kind of sharp. Dakotas are mostly in the 40s to 50s. Nebraska, Kansas, they rise into the 60s and 70s, and then Oklahoma and Texas further higher into the 70s and 80s, with the South and West Texas, pushing even warmer than that. So we have a strong spring gradient here, but the warm side of it is expansive. In the Great Lakes and Midwest area, the coolest values are concentrated across northern Minnesota, northern Wisconsin, around that Lake Superior area, where the daytime highs are mostly in the 30s and 40s. As we move south through Iowa, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio area, temperatures are recovering and they're getting into that 50s and 60s. So the middle of the country is not kind of cold, but the upper Midwest is kind of still on that cooler side. Across the South, Texas kind of really stands out for me. A lot of the state is in the 80s, especially kind of the West and South Texas, with some lower 90s on the hotter edge. The lower Mississippi Valley and the Gulf are more in the 70s, and the Southeast is broadly kind of from upper 60s to low 70s. Florida, where I am, it's been mostly warm, kind of in the 70s to low 80s. In the Northeast, northern New England is still cool, mainly in the 30s to 40s, while the farther south through New York, Pennsylvania, Mid-Atlantic, highs generally improve. They're kind of in the upper 40s to 50s with kind of some low 60s in there as well. So the observed map overall shows a broad warmth from the southwest into the southern and central US, with the coolest parts of the pattern focused on the northern Great Lakes and northern New England area. Now, the map that you guys have come to see, the maximum temperature ranked against the last 85 years. This is kind of crazy and definitely much more revealing as to what's been going on. Large parts of the West are in very warm to extremely warm historical ranking territory. I'm talking easily top 5 compared to the other 85 years. California, Nevada, Arizona, Utah, much of the interior West are dominated by a strong, warm signal, those deep, dark red colors indicating their single-digit rankings here. Absolutely crazy. In some areas, kind of especially the Southwest, kind of nearby interior, I'm going to say that these are probably number 1. I'd have to look at the actual raw data rather than just the picture, but I think, we're probably in the 1s and 2s here in terms of the warmest temperatures for this period against the last 85 years. What also stands out here is the far north that this warm historical signal is extending. It's not just Arizona and Southern California. Parts of Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico, they're all in this kind of top 10 deep, dark red colors. This matters because it means the anomaly we're seeing here is a broad and deep signal across the entire western half of the country. Even the absolute highs, they're only in the 60s and low 70s, but that's super unusual for this time of year. They're, regular for May, June, July, not early or mid-March. The plains are showing some broad warmth ranking too. Kansas, Nebraska, Dakotas, Oklahoma, Texas are largely in the warm half of that 85-year range. Many places into that kind of very warm category. So the central US isn't just warm too in terms of raw kind of temperatures, it's also historically warm compared to that March climatology. The Midwest is kind of more mixed though. It's still leaning warm overall. The central Midwest, especially Missouri, Iowa, Illinois, kind of adjacent areas, are trending notably warm by rank, but once you get into the upper Great Lakes, kind of that ranking starts to weaken. And some areas getting close to the middle of the pack, and some of them are actually leaning cooler, so kind of in that 45 to 85 in terms of their maximum temperature ranking. In the east, the signal is kind of dropping off even further. Mid-Atlantic shows some warmth by rank, but much of the Northeast is kind of closer to average, especially northern New England. Florida, it also kind of stands out as much less historically warm than the West or the Plains. It felt relatively normal here for the last 10 days. It was certainly warm in kind of Fahrenheit terms. I'm not saying that it was cold, but compared to what Florida can be like in late March, it wasn't anything exceptional. So, the main point on the observed ranking map is that the western half of the country and much of the plains were not just warm, they were unusually warm in a historical sense. While the Northeast and Florida, they've been comparatively ordinary for the last 10 days. Moving forward to the 10-day forecast, looking at the actual maximum temperature map, this is covering March 25th through April 3rd, I think. The general warm pattern remains in place, but there are some shifts where that strongest heat is kind of centered. The hottest part of the country stays anchored in the southwest. Arizona is still the clear core of these high temperatures, widespread 90s, some 100s in there. Southern California and parts of New Mexico are remaining kind of very warm as well, lots of 80s and low 90s. So the desert heat doesn't back off anytime soon. If anything, it's remaining established and not moving from where it's going. Across California as a whole, though, we're still kind of seeing a strong coast to interior gradient. Coastal areas are mainly in the 60s to low 70s, while inland valleys are pushing 70s into the 80s. The Pacific Northwest remains much cooler than the Southwest, 50s along the coast and kind of broad 60s inland. So we're seeing a western thermal contrast, if you will. The Rockies and High Plains also remain quite warm. Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, adjacent areas, widespread 60s and 70s. Eastern Colorado and the nearby plains push into the 70s more consistently, and parts of New Mexico and the southern high plains are still warm. That keeps kind of the central interior of the country kind of firmly on the warm side of the season, but is at the same warmth that we saw from the previous 10 days. Across the plains, from Nebraska and Kansas south into Oklahoma and Texas, there's a broad area of kind of upper 70s and 80s. Texas remaining especially warm, much of the state in the 70s to 80s, and hotter southern and western sections, which are in the upper 80s to kind of low 90s. So, the south central US is still carrying on the major heat signal, but we'll have to see how it compares in terms of its ranking. In the Midwest, the northern interior remains cooler. The upper Great Lakes are still mostly in the 30s to 40s, while farther south through Iowa, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, the map shows more 50s and 60s. So the middle of the country is staying mild to warm in real terms, but the northern lakes are holding on to much cooler daytime highs. Across the south and southeast, temperatures are generally in the upper 60s to mid 70s, some low 80s, closer to the Gulf and Florida. And for me here, we're going to see mostly 70s and 80s again, but not as nearly as hot as the southwest. The northeast, again, stays one of the cooler regions on the map. Northern New England mostly staying in the 30s to 40s, while southern New England and mid-Atlantic recover somewhat into the 40s and 50s. So the forecast map is keeping that strong warmth focused on the southwest into the central and southern plains, while the northeast remains kind of less aggressive. Now we had a look at the forecast temperatures. Let's break down how they rank compared to the last 85 years. A very large part of the country is still projected to run on the warm side of the historical ranking scale. The strongest warm ranking signal expands from central and southern plains into the lower Midwest and parts of the South. Kansas, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Texas, and Missouri, Arkansas, and all the kind of surrounding areas show a broad kind of area of high-end warm rankings. This means the upcoming 10-day period is expected to be one of the hotter in this calendar window compared to those historical records. We're top 20 at least for much of these areas. The Southwest remains strongly warm by rank as well. Arizona, New Mexico, and southern Utah, Nevada, parts of California continue to lean heavily towards the hot end of the scale. Again, kind of top 20 or top 10 at least. Compared with the observational rankings, the forecast ranking pattern looks a lot more textured in the West. It's not as consistent in those kind of top 1 or 2 years. There's more individual patterns going on rather than that broad signal of substantive warmth. The Rockies and High Plains also remain historically warm relative to the season. Colorado and Wyoming and nearby states stay kind of solidly in that warm side, with some localized areas dropping into the deep and hot category. Again, this is kind of where the ranking matters. It's not necessarily the hottest temperatures in the country, but it's very unusual for late March into early April to see these temperatures. The Midwest shows a kind of split. I'd say the central Midwest is warm ranking, especially from Missouri, Iowa, into Illinois and Indiana, but the upper Great Lakes remain much kind of less impressive, if you will. Northern Minnesota, northern Wisconsin, kind of nearby areas are kind of close to average, again, with some pockets still leaning cool. The Northeast stands out as the least anomalous for the region. Northern New England, especially Maine, trends close to average, even somewhat cool relative to the 85-year ranking scale. So it's going to be in that 50 to 60 in terms of ranking for maximum temperatures. Parts of the coastal New England and Northeast corridor are much less noticeable than the central US, Florida is staying mixed too, some warm areas, but near average kind of in general. So the forecast ranking map says the next 10 days are likely to also be historically warm over a broad swath of the country, with the most consistent and exceptional warmth standing out in the Southwest through the plains into the lower Midwest and South. While the Northeast, that's kind of remaining outside of that core anomaly. So what are the context and implications of this information that we've looked at? What the signal means is that the country is not just warm from a general sense. The observed map shows that the last 10 days already featured broad, above-season daytime warmth, especially from the west into the plains. And the ranking map shows that in many areas, the warmth was unusually high relative to the last 85 years for this exact time window. And when I say unusual, I mean we're seeing top 10 in terms of maximum temperature for huge parts of the country. The forecast shows that this pattern isn't ending anytime soon. We're going to see consecutive heat for a long period of time. It continues forward with another kind of broad zone of very warm maximum temperatures, and in parts of the central and western US, those values still rank kind of well towards the hotter end of that historical distribution. Why does this matter? Because it points to persistence. When both the observed and forecast windows are warm and both rank unusually high for the season, it means that things like cooling demand can build far earlier than normal, especially across Southwest Texas and South Central states. It also matters for health. I think this is one of the key factors I want to take away from today and what that could mean. Heat is one of the deadliest weather hazards in the United States. Heat waves kill many people every year, and repeated early season warmth can be especially risky because people are less acclimatized to it than they would be later in the summer. So we have issues for energy demand, and we're also probably going to be seeing issues for heat and heat-related health issues. If you like this video and you want to see more, please subscribe to the Weather Mapping YouTube channel, and I'll see you on the next one. Laters.
Weathermapping.com